Angela Carter carried quiet power into her hometown. To officers Mark Stevens and Brian Collins, she looked like just another black woman behind the wheel, an easy target for intimidation. They swaggered up with sneers and heavy flashlights, every word daring her silence. Then came the shove, sharp, deliberate, echoing against cold metal as their laughter carried down the street. But what they couldn't see was the truth behind her steady eyes. 30 years of command, 4 stars earned, a soldier's unshakable resolve. They thought she would bow her head and take it. They were wrong. And with just one phone call to the Pentagon, Angela would bring their entire world crashing down. The late afternoon sun stretched across a main street in long amber streaks as Angela Carter's military-issue SUV rolled into her hometown. The vehicle hummed with quiet precision, every detail polished like her uniform, its plates glinting with Pentagon credentials that had once opened every gate from Kabul to Berlin. Yet here, in Millbrook, Alabama, those same plates seemed to draw stares as sharp as knives. Angela kept her hands steady on the steering wheel, though her chest tightened with every familiar landmark that slid past her windows. The old movie theater, its letters missing from years of neglect. The diner where she'd once scrubbed dishes as a teenager, still with its backdoor entrance reserved for black customers even in the so-called modern era. And at the far end of town, Thompson's funeral services, its small lot jammed with cars parked haphazardly along the grass. Her decorated uniform felt like armor, heavy with medals and 4 stars that carried the weight of 3 decades in the U.S. Army. To the strangers on the sidewalks, she was either a hero or a target. No one quite dared to meet her eyes for long. Some looked with awe, whispering her name as if it belonged to a myth. Others let their contempt show, smirks tugging at thin lips, arms folded as though her very presence disturbed the old balance of the town. She parked in the gravel lot and cut the engine. Silence pressed in, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the distant creak of cicadas. Angela straightened her jacket, smoothing the ribbons and bars into flawless alignment. Her mother had always said, "Walk into a room as if you own the ground under your feet," and Angela did, even as her heart cracked under the weight of why she was here. The mahogany casket inside already smelled of roses. The crunch of her polished boots on gravel was deliberate, each step measured, announcing her arrival before she even reached the funeral home's doorway. Inside, and the hum of conversation faltered, then swelled into a wave of whispers. "That's Angela Carter, general now. Think she forgot where she came from?" The words hissed like steam through the heavy summer air. On one side of the room, elderly black women from her mother's church wiped at their eyes, their expressions fierce with pride. On the other, the town's white establishment clustered like wary cattle, their disapproving glances thinly veiled by funeral etiquette. "Baby girl," the voice cracked with both joy and grief. Angela turned and folded Aunt Rose into her arms. Her aunt's frame had grown smaller, bones bird-like beneath the cotton dress, but her embrace was strong enough to bring tears stinging Angela's eyes. "I'm here, Aunt Rose," Angela whispered into the older woman's silver hair. "I'm here now." "Your mama would be so proud," Aunt Rose said, pulling back to study her. "Look at you, shining brighter than a Christmas tree." She clipped every article, you know, every single one, even that spread in Time magazine, told the neighbors she bought out the whole drugstore rack. Angela managed a smile, though the ache in her chest deepened. "She called me that morning, screamed so loud on the phone I thought something terrible had happened. Then she told me she'd bought every copy in town." Their private moment ended when Reverend Miller approached. His collar seemed too tight, his steps too careful. "General Carter," he said with a stiff smile, hand extended. "Welcome home, though I wish it were under gentler circumstances." "Reverend?" Angela shook his hand firmly, reading the nervous flick of his eyes toward the white side of the room. "Thank you for being with my mother in her final days." "Of course." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Might I have a private word?" She followed him to a dim corner, the drone of conversation muffled by the carpeted walls. The Reverend dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief despite the frigid air conditioning. "You've been gone a long time," he began cautiously. "Things here are delicate, balanced, you might say." Angela's jaw tightened. "Balanced on whose backs? Reverend?" "That's exactly my point." He leaned closer, his eyes darting nervously to the white officials across the room. "Your mother knew how this town worked. She knew when to speak and when to swallow injustice." Angela finished for him, her tone sharp. His throat bobbed. "Please, for everyone's sake, stay quiet while you're here. Pay your respects and return to Washington. Don't stir up trouble." Angela stepped in, her words like steel wrapped in velvet. "My mother taught me that silence in the face of wrong is sin of its own. Reverend, maybe you've forgotten that lesson, but I haven't." Ari, the service unfolded like a study in segregation. Mourners divided themselves without instruction. Black families pressed together in the left pews, white dignitaries filling the right. Angela's eulogy carried like a command through the chapel, her voice honoring her mother's courage. A teacher who had quietly slipped Black history into lessons when textbooks forbade it. A woman who held dignity like a shield against decades of insult. Church ladies dabbed their eyes. White officials shifted uncomfortably, some frowning at the raw honesty in Angela's words. After the final prayer, Angela hugged Aunt Rose once more, promising to stop by later. The air outside hit heavy and wet, the heat clinging to her skin. She drove slowly toward her mother's house, her eyes snagging on places thick with memory. The park where whites only signs had once stood. The courthouse steps where her mother had marched with neighbors against voter suppression. The diner that still made Black customers pick up food from the back door. Decades after the law supposedly changed, her mother's Victorian house stood proud despite age, paint peeling but shutters straight, the yard trimmed with care. Angela had offered more than once to buy her mother something new, but Sarah Carter had always refused. "This house knows our history," she'd say. "Every creak tells our story." Angela's mind drifted to her mother's voice as blue lights flashed suddenly in her rearview mirror. Her stomach dropped. Sirens chirped, demanding she pull over. Years of military discipline steadied her hands as she guided the SUV to the curb. She positioned her documents clearly on the dashboard, her ID visible, her posture textbook calm. The setting sun painted the street in purple-orange hues as she inhaled, exhaled, and remembered her mother's words. "Baby, in this town, you've got to be twice as careful and 3 times as strong." She stepped out of the SUV, every movement deliberate. Her spine was as straight as the flagpole outside the Pentagon. "Good evening, officers," she said evenly, voice carrying authority earned across continents. Officer Mark Stevens swaggered forward, one hand resting on his holstered weapon. Behind him, Officer Brian Collins spread his legs wide, adopting the stance of someone itching for a fight. Angela recognized the posture. It was the same she'd seen in enemy combatants across the Middle East. Well, Mark's drawl dripped contempt as his eyes skimmed her uniform without respect. "What do we got here? Playing dress-up? Girl?" Angela held steady. "I am General Angela Carter, United States Army, 4-star, currently stationed at the Pentagon. My military ID and registration are right there." Brian's laugh sliced through the humid air. "Listen to her. Mark, General Carter," he mimed air quotes. "Ain't that precious?" "Step away from the vehicle," Mark ordered, mock politeness coating his voice. "On what grounds?" Angela asked, not budging. "State the reason for this stop." "That's resisting," Mark snapped, his mask slipping. He grabbed her arm roughly, spinning her into the SUV's hood. The impact slammed the breath from her chest, but she made no sound. "You're making a serious mistake," she said, cheek pressed to hot metal. "Contact your superior officer immediately." "Shut up," Brian barked, seizing her other arm. "You don't give orders here, girl." Across the street, a young woman raised her phone. Recording. Mark spotted her. "Put that down or you're next." When she didn't, Brian stormed over, snatched the phone, and smashed it onto the pavement. Angela's muscles screamed to fight, to flip Mark over his own cruiser hood, but experience kept her still. This wasn't a battlefield where brute force solved problems. This was a war of optics, of evidence. Mark yanked her hair, forcing her head back. "Think you're special in that uniform? Think you can waltz back here, high and mighty?" His words reeked of beer and spite. The next moment exploded in pain. He swept her legs, slamming her onto asphalt. Brian's boot drove into her ribs. "Not so mighty now, are you?" he sneered, delivering another kick. Angela tasted blood, but locked her eyes on the gathering crowd. Some looked away in shame, some stared with horror. Others, too many, watched with twisted satisfaction. She memorized their faces. Every witness was ammunition. Mark pressed a knee into her back, cuffing her roughly. "You know your problem?" he hissed. "You forgot your place." Her lips split as she answered with terrifying calm. "Every action you take is being witnessed. Every illegal move is being documented." Brian's laugh faltered. More phones had appeared in the crowd, lifted despite his earlier threats. He kicked at a few, but couldn't stop them all. The officers dragged her upright, blood staining her once pristine uniform. Yet she stood straight, dignity intact. Brian shoved her head into the cruiser doorframe before pushing her inside. Through the glass, Angela watched Main Street fall silent. Neighbors she'd greeted at the funeral now turned away, their porch lights flickering on as if to spotlight their cowardice. Mark and Brian exchanged smug grins in the front seat, oblivious to the calculation in Angela's eyes. They didn't see her testing the cuffs, or the measured way she cataloged every bruise, every move, every face. The last rays of sunlight caught the stars on her shoulders, still gleaming despite dirt and blood. In that glint was a promise, not of revenge, but of justice. The holding cell stank of bleach and rust. 8 feet by 10, graffiti-scarred walls. A steel toilet humming with chemical disinfectant. A buzzing fluorescent bulb painted everything in sickly light. Angela sat on the cold bench, ribs screaming, lip throbbing, but her posture remained military perfect. Boots clattered down the linoleum hall. Officer Brian Collins appeared, twirling his keys with exaggerated swagger. He leaned against the bars, a smirk curling his mouth. "Comfortable in there, General?" He dragged the title like filth. "Bet it feels different from your fancy Pentagon office." Angela studied him like a hawk studies prey. Beneath the swagger, she saw it, the tremor in his hands, the dart of his eyes when she met them. "I'd like to make my phone call now," she said quietly, voice steady. "It's my right," Brian sneered. "Now you want to talk about rights? Should have thought about that before resisting arrest." The phone call, Officer Collins, she said his name like a knife. "Or shall I add denial of rights to the list?" His forced laugh cracked. "What list?" "The phone. Now." Something in her calm certainty rattled him. He unlocked the cell. "Fine, try anything funny. You'll get worse than you did on Main Street." Angela rose, smooth and composed despite the fire in her ribs. She followed him to the wall phone near the booking desk. A few officers pretended to shuffle papers, eyes flicking nervously between her and Brian. Angela dialed from memory. Each press of the button was deliberate. "Colonel Harris," came the crisp answer. "Colonel, this is General Carter." Her voice was professional, as if from a routine Pentagon call. "Apologies for disturbing you at this hour." "Angela, what's wrong?" His voice sharpened. "I am being held in Millbrook Police Department following an unlawful arrest and assault. Excessive force was used, witnessed by multiple civilians. Phones were confiscated and destroyed. Officers Mark Stevens and Brian Collins involved. Recommend immediate escalation to the secretary." Brian's smirk drained, color vanishing from his cheeks. "Are you injured?" Harris demanded. "Affirmative. Bruised ribs, Lacerations, but stable. Situation requires federal oversight. Give me 30 minutes, Harris snapped. Do not speak to anyone else. Understood, Colonel. Thank you. Angela replaced the receiver with surgical precision. Brian tried to recover his swagger. Supposed to scare us? Some call to your military buddies? No. Officer Collins. Angela turned fully, eyes sharp as blades. That was procedure. And the wheels of justice move quickly when a four-star general is assaulted by local law enforcement. The precinct's phone rang, shrill and sudden. Sergeant Miller snatched it up. His face shifted from annoyance to shock. Yeah, sir. Yep. The secretary himself? Understood. He slammed the receiver down. Collins, get those cuffs off her now. Brian's hands shook as he fumbled with the keys. Phones lit up across the precinct. Officers scrambled, voices cracking as they answered senators, federal directors, Pentagon officials. Angela stood silent, her bruised face calm, her back unbroken. Her silence was more powerful than any threat. When Sergeant Miller finally escorted her to the door, apologizing with every breath, Angela said nothing. The night air outside wrapped her in humid silence. Alone at last. She allowed one brief grimace of pain before straightening again. She had lost this skirmish. Yes. But the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, heat rose early over Millbrook, shimmering off rooftops and baking the cracked sidewalks before 9 o'clock. Angela Carter stood in front of her mother's house, her uniform pressed, her jaw tight. The house looked exactly as it always had. Yellow paint, sun-faded at the edges. White porch swings squeaking in the humid breeze. It smelled faintly of magnolia and old wood, the same scent that had clung to her mother's hugs. But Angela's eyes were fixed on the small black sedan idling down the street. No plates, windows tinted. The kind of silent threat she'd learned to recognize in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in every conflict zone where enemies pretended they weren't watching. Her ribs still ached from the kicks Officer Brian Collins had delivered the night before. Bruises bloomed purple beneath her uniform. Her lip was still split. But Angela carried herself with the same steel-backed bearing that had carried her through ambushes and mortar fire. If the car was meant to scare her, it had chosen the wrong target. She drove first to the cemetery. She had promised Aunt Rose she'd bring fresh flowers to her mother's grave. But the moment she stepped between the iron gates, her stride faltered. Something was wrong. The air itself felt heavier, tense. Her heart dropped when she reached the family plot. The headstone was no longer clean marble. It had been defaced, scarred with angry red spray paint. Crude racial slurs sprawled across her mother's name. Someone had stomped the flowers from the funeral into dirt. Glass vases shattered, stems broken and scattered. Worst of all, 3 words carved into the grass with a blade. Go home. Angela's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the damp earth, her hands digging into the soil as a sound tore from her throat. Half sob, half roar of rage. She pressed her forehead against the vandalized stone, shaking violently, her tears mixing with sweat and dirt. For 30 years, she had faced enemy fire without breaking. But this, the desecration of her mother's final resting place, cut deeper than any wound. Memories flashed, her mother leaning over homework at the kitchen table, whispering encouragement when Angela doubted herself. Her laughter in the pews on Sunday mornings, her stubborn pride in that old Victorian house. To see her memory trampled by cowards hiding behind spray paint ignited a fury Angela hadn't felt since the battlefield. She stayed there until her fists bled from gripping the grass. Then she stood, spine straight again, though her chest ached with grief. Back at the house, Aunt Rose bustled in the kitchen, setting out fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread on faded china plates. The rooster wallpaper had been peeling since Angela was a teenager, but Aunt Rose moved around it with practiced efficiency. You barely touched your food, child, Aunt Rose scolded gently, watching Angela push a piece of chicken around her plate. Your mama would haunt me if I let you waste away. Angela set her fork down with a sharp clink. I can't eat. Not after what they did to Mama's grave. Aunt Rose's hands trembled as she poured sweet tea into a glass. I heard about that. Reverend Miller's organizing a cleanup crew for tomorrow morning. She sat heavily in the chair across from Angela, her eyes glistening. But baby, that's exactly why you need to leave. These people, they're dangerous. Always have been. You poke the bear, you'll get mauled. So we just let them win? Angela asked softly, her tone harder than steel. I've lived 74 years in this town, Aunt Rose whispered. Taught children through segregation, through desegregation, through every kind of hate you can imagine. I've seen what happens when we push too hard, too fast. They burned down the Williams store in '65 just for hiring black cashiers. They shot Robert Turner's boy in '72 for registering voters. Her voice cracked. I can't watch them destroy you too. Angela reached across the table, clasping her aunt's weathered hands. I understand your fear, Aunt Rose, I do. But I'm not that little girl anymore. I've led battalions. I've commanded in combat. I know how to fight smart. Her aunt shook her head. This isn't your kind of war. There are no Geneva Conventions here. No rules. These people will... A knock at the back door cut her off. Both women froze until a familiar voice called, Miss Rose, it's Daniel Brooks. Aunt Rose hurried to open the door. A man stepped in, taller than Angela remembered, his press badge swinging from his neck. Daniel Brooks had once been the wiry kid with ink-stained hands who ran the high school paper. Now he was thicker through the shoulders, streaks of gray peppering his beard, but his eyes burned with the same restless curiosity. Angela Carter, he grinned, still causing trouble, I see. Daniel Brooks, she said, standing to embrace him. Still chasing stories. He dropped a thick manila envelope on the kitchen table, pushing aside plates of chicken. Papers spilled across the surface. Complaint forms, hospital records, obituaries. I've been tracking police misconduct in this county for years. Look at these patterns. Angela leaned over the documents. The names and dates leapt out. Broken bones, wrongful arrests, suspicious deaths. They bury the evidence, Daniel explained. Rewrite reports, intimidate witnesses. But I've got sources inside the department. People waiting for someone like you. Someone they can't just disappear. Daniel Brooks, don't you put dangerous ideas in her head? Aunt Rose snapped. She needs to leave while she still can. With respect, Miss Rose, Daniel said gently. Leaving is exactly what they want. They count on good people running scared. But Angela's got something no one else had. Rank, resources, a direct line to Washington. Angela picked up a photo of a young black man in a hospital bed, his face swollen beyond recognition. When was this? 3 months ago. Official reports said he fell downstairs during arrest. Same officers who attacked you, Stevens and Collins. Chief Hayes's personal attack dogs. Angela's knuckles whitened. Baby, please, Aunt Rose begged. Your mama would want justice. Angela cut in, voice trembling with controlled fury. She spent 30 years teaching kids to hold their heads high, even when the world tried to break them. Survival isn't enough anymore. She gathered the documents into a neat stack, aligning the corners with precision. I didn't fight wars overseas to surrender at home. Not when the enemy wears badges and sits in City Hall. Daniel pulled out his car keys. I've got more files at my office. Police records, internal complaints, everything they tried to shred. We can start connecting the dots tonight. At least wait until morning, Aunt Rose pleaded. These back roads aren't safe after dark. The dark is exactly what we need, Angela said gently, kissing her aunt's cheek. Lock the door after we leave. And don't worry, I learned a few things about watching my six in Afghanistan. The night air was thick with cricket song as Angela and Daniel walked to his car. Spanish moss hung from oak trees like gray ghosts. Angela inhaled deeply, the humidity clinging to her lungs. You sure about this? Daniel asked as they slid into his beat-up Corolla. Let them come, Angela said, fastening her seatbelt. I've got 30 years of tactical experience and 4 stars on my shoulder. What do they have? Fear, Daniel muttered, starting the engine. Fear of losing power? That makes them dangerous. Fear makes them sloppy, Angela corrected, and sloppy enemies make mistakes. They drove past the courthouse, its white columns glowing in moonlight. A dark sedan idled across the square. No plates, dented fender. Angela's jaw tightened. Same car from earlier, she said. Daniel glanced casually. They're not even trying to hide anymore. Angela's eyes narrowed. Good. Let them watch. By the time they realize what kind of fight they're in, it'll be too late. The story beats are set for the next escalation. Courthouse files, Sophia Turner's entry, testimonies, and the community beginning to rally. The courthouse loomed in the pale gold of dawn, its white columns stained by decades of humidity, its flag barely moving in the still summer air. Angela Carter climbed the marble steps with Daniel Brooks at her side, her boots clicking sharply on stone worn down by generations of feet. The building looked like a relic, a monument to a version of justice that had never truly included her people. At the top, a young woman paced, her navy suit immaculate despite the heat. She ended a phone call abruptly when she spotted them. General Carter, she said, extending a hand. Sophia Turner. Daniel called me last night. Angela shook it firmly, noting the younger woman's fire. Sophia's grip was strong, her eyes sharper still. You're the attorney who's been filing those misconduct suits, Angela said. Trying to, Sophia replied with a weary laugh. Judge Thompson keeps ruling them misfiled, paperwork lost, witnesses too unreliable. But I worked here through law school. I know where they hide the bodies. Metaphorically speaking, she jingled a heavy ring of keys. Follow me. They slipped through a side door into echoing hallways. Venetian blinds cast slatted shadows on dusty floors. The air smelled of old paper and damp stone, heavy with the weight of secrets. Sophia led them to the basement, her heels clicking like a metronome. The archives stretched endlessly, row after row of metal shelves sagging with files. Dust coated the air, tickling Angela's throat. Here, Sophia said, unlocking a storage room. If they haven't shredded them, the cases we want should be here. Daniel sneezed, brushing dust from a box. Some of these go back 20 years. Angela pulled one marked Johnson, Marcus, traffic stop incident. Inside were photos that turned her stomach. A teenager's neck bruised. The report calling it accidental asphyxiation. I remember this, she whispered. 2003. His mother taught with my mama. Police claimed he choked himself. Look at the coroner's signature, Sophia pointed. Dr. William Lawson, brother to Mayor David Lawson. Daniel cursed softly. The Lawson family's got tentacles everywhere. Police, coroner's office, judges, development projects. They spread more files across a table, patterns emerging like blood through cloth. Repeated names, identical cover stories. The same officers cropping up again and again. Here's another one, Sophia held up a folder. Sarah Martinez, 2015, ruled suicide in custody. But look at these bruises. Defensive wounds? Officer in charge? Angela's eyes hardened. Mark Stevens. And his partner, Brian Collins, Daniel added grimly. Angela flipped another file. A 60-year-old man, cane visible in booking photos, later reported aggressive and armed. Shot dead. How many? Angela demanded. I've counted 15 suspicious deaths since 2000, Sophia said, plus dozens of assault complaints that vanished, and those are just the ones on record. Angela studied a photograph of Mark Stevens receiving a commendation from Mayor Lawson. The mayor's hand rested proudly on the officer's shoulder, both men grinning. Her stomach turned. They're not just covering up, she said. They're rewarding brutality, Building a private army with federal grants. Sophia nodded. I traced grant money meant for community policing. It went to surveillance gear, military-style weapons. They're preparing for war against their own citizens. Angela's voice was steel. Then let's give them one. But first, we need witnesses willing to testify. Pardon me, Daniel tapped his notebook. I've got names. People waiting for someone like you to make them believe they're not alone. First is Darnell Williams. Deacon at First Baptist, Angela recalled. Taught Sunday school with Mama. Daniel's jaw tightened. Police broke his spine during a stop 7 years ago. He's been in a wheelchair since. They silenced him with threats. Sophia closed her briefcase, eyes fierce. We need his story. Tonight, the small yellow house leaned against time like an old fighter still standing after too many blows. Paint peeled from the siding. A wooden ramp stretched to the porch, and wind chimes clinked softly in the hot breeze. Angela and Sophia climbed together, Daniel following with his bag. Angela knocked gently. Inside, the whir of an electric wheelchair approached. The door cracked open, revealing a gaunt face lined with pain. You shouldn't be here, Darnell Williams whispered. They watched this street. Angela stepped forward. Mr. Williams, I'm General Angela Carter, Sarah Carter's daughter. Recognition flickered. Little Angela, Lord have mercy. He glanced up and down the street before opening the door wider. Come in quick. Pull them curtains. The living room was cramped with medical equipment and old family photos. A hospital bed filled one corner. Angela smelled disinfectant mixed with fried food and something sweet, peach cobbler cooling on the counter. You Mama was a good woman, Darnell said as he parked his wheelchair near an armchair. Brought me food every week after it happened. Read scripture to me. She didn't deserve what they did to her grave. Angela leaned in. Mr. Williams, we're gathering evidence for a federal case. We need your testimony. Fear flickered across his face. I can't. I signed papers. Chief Hayes himself came to my hospital room, said if I breathed a word, my grandkids would pay the price. Sophia's voice was gentle. We can protect your family. I've worked with the FBI's witness program. You don't understand. His voice broke. Hayes owns everyone. Judges, state police, even congressmen. My Marcus tried to tell the truth. His eyes filled with tears. They planted drugs in his car, said he killed himself in custody. My boy never made it out. Angela's jaw clenched until her teeth ached. She paced the room, fury burning. I'm not a local judge. Mr. Williams, I command divisions. I've got friends in Washington. Hayes can't touch. For a long moment, he studied her. Then his trembling hands wheeled him to a bookshelf. He pulled out a Bible, worn and underlined. From its hollowed pages, he drew a thick manila envelope. Your Mama helped me hide these, he said, voice shaking. Been waiting for the right time. Inside were photos, officers posing with bloody batons, wallets held like trophies, falsified reports signed by Robert Hayes in his early days as sergeant, evidence buried for decades. Sophia documented each piece with her phone, cataloging carefully. This is damning, but we'll need your testimony. Mr. Williams, would you? The window exploded before she could finish. Glass rained down, rocks flying inside. One hit the hospital bed. Another skittered across the floor. The largest slammed against the wall, painted with crude red letters. Shut up! Down! Angela barked, instincts snapping into place. She threw herself over Darnell as more glass shattered. Tires squealed outside, engines roaring away into the night. Angela crawled to one of the rocks, hands steady even as her ribs screamed. She held it up. They're scared. This proves we're close. They'll come back, Darnell whispered, voice shaking. Take the photos. Use them. Just don't let them know it came from me. Sophia helped him into a back room, away from jagged glass. Wind whistled through broken windows, stirring curtains like ghostly hands. "We'll board these up," Angela promised, "and I'll post security tonight. You won't be alone." Darnell caught her wrist. "Your mama always said you'd be the one to break them. Don't stop now." Angela pressed his hand. "I won't." They drove away with the envelope of evidence clutched tight. 3 blocks later, headlights flared in Angela's mirror. Bright, relentless. "The sedan from the courthouse," Sophia muttered. "No plates," Daniel confirmed. "Been tailing us since we left." Angela's grip tightened on the wheel. She took a sharp right onto Maple Avenue. The sedan followed. "Call Reverend Miller," she ordered. "Tell him to open the church. We're bringing this into the light." First Baptist Church's old wooden pews creaked under the weight of bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. Word had spread fast through the black community. General Carter was calling a meeting. Families came clutching children. Elders leaned on canes. Young activists held phones high to record. Even a handful of white allies slipped into back rows. Retired teachers, a small business owner, one nurse still in scrubs. Reverend Miller shifted uneasily near the pulpit, torn between fear and duty, but he hadn't barred them. Not tonight, not with so many demanding entry. At 8 p.m., Angela stepped to the podium in her full dress uniform. The crowd fell silent, air thick with anticipation. "3 nights ago," she began, her voice carrying, "I was assaulted on Main Street by officers sworn to protect. They didn't know I was a general. They just saw what they wanted to see, a black woman they could brutalize without consequence." A murmur of recognition rippled through the pews. Too many heads nodded. Too many carried scars of the same treatment. "They thought they could break me. But in that cell, I remembered something my mother taught me. Dignity isn't what they take from you. It's what they can never touch." "Amen," voices shouted back. Angela lifted the envelope high. "We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have truth that's been buried too long. Look around you. Every family here has a story. A brother beaten, a cousin jailed, a father who never came home." The crowd shifted, people wiping tears, others clenching fists. "They count on our fear, on our silence, on us turning away. But I didn't fight wars overseas to surrender in my own hometown. I didn't earn these stars to let corrupt men disgrace everything they represent. Tonight, we stopped being afraid." The church erupted in applause, thunderous and unrelenting. People rose to their feet, some crying, some raising fists. Reverend Miller stepped forward slowly, his face lined with conflict. He gripped the podium. "I have been silent too long," he confessed, voice breaking. "I thought peace meant safety. I thought silence meant survival. But silence is its own violence, and I cannot, will not commit violence against my people any longer." His eyes filled with tears. "This church stands with General Carter. We demand accountability. We demand justice." The roar shook the rafters. Phones streamed live to social media. Across town, in quiet living rooms, people watched in shock and awe. At the back wall, Chief Robert Hayes stood flanked by plainclothes officers, arms crossed, face carved from stone. His cold eyes locked on Angela's across the crowded church. She didn't flinch. That night, as candles flickered outside the church and chants rose into the humid air, Angela knew the line had been drawn. This was no longer her battle alone. It was everyone's. The warehouse district always carried a smell of rust and damp brick, even in the middle of the summer night. Angela Carter had told Daniel Brooks not to go alone, but the man was stubborn, driven by a journalist's curse, the need to know, the need to document, no matter the danger. His old Corolla bumped along cracked pavement as the sodium lamps overhead flickered and buzzed like tired insects. He parked behind an abandoned factory, clutching his leather messenger bag where a recorder and notebook waited. His contact, a former police dispatcher, had promised him internal logs and recordings, proof that arrests had been staged and evidence fabricated. But fear had dictated the meeting place, hidden in shadows where no curious eyes would follow. Daniel waited with the engine idling, tapping his fingers on the wheel, sweat gathering at his temple. He checked his phone. One unread message from Angela. "Be careful. Call me when you're done." He was about to type back when headlights flared in his rearview mirror. Too bright, too fast. He reached for his bag instinctively. The blow came sudden, a car door slamming, footsteps pounding, then the sharp crack of glass as his window exploded inward. Rough hands yanked him from the seat. He landed hard on the pavement, the taste of iron filling his mouth. The night exploded in pain as boots connected with his ribs. Again and again. He tried to shield his face, but the blows came relentless, punctuated by cruel laughter. "Big shot reporter," one voice sneered. "Think you can take down the chief?" Another kick. "Let's see you write about this." He felt his consciousness slipping, but not before he shoved the recorder deeper into his bag, praying it had captured every word. Sirens wailed in the distance, not rushing to save him, but marking time as his attackers melted back into the dark sedan. Tires screeched, taillights vanished, leaving Daniel broken on the ground. Across town, Angela and Sophia Turner sat in a corner booth of the Henderson Street Diner. The neon sign outside flickered against the window, bathing their table in tired red light. Plates of untouched pancakes grew cold between them while Sophia spread legal documents across the formica surface. She explained strategy, injunctions, and subpoenas, her young lawyer's voice sharp with determination. Angela listened, sipping bitter coffee, her eyes scanning the window every few seconds. Years of battlefield instinct wouldn't let her rest. Their phones buzzed at the same time. Notifications flooded the screens. Headlines flashing. Local journalist hospitalized after brutal assault. Civil rights attorney arrested on drug charges. General Angela Carter sparks riot. Sophia's face drained of color. "Daniel," she whispered, clutching her phone. Angela's chair screeched across the floor as she stood, keys in hand. By the time they reached the warehouse district, blue lights painted the brick walls. Police tape flapped in the humid breeze. Angela pushed forward, her uniform lending her a shred of authority. But an officer stepped into her path, blocking her view of paramedics loading a stretcher into the ambulance. "Active crime scene, ma'am," he said flatly. "No civilians allowed." Angela's voice cut like steel. "That's my colleague on that stretcher. I am a United States Army general. Don't care if you're the Queen of England." The cop sneered. "Step back." Angela clenched her fists, jaw tight, every fiber of her body demanding she break through. But the doors slammed, the sirens wailed, and the ambulance sped away, leaving her standing in flashing red and blue. She whispered his name, Daniel, like a vow. The trap for Sophia came minutes later. Two cruisers roared up, brakes screeching. Officers poured out, flashlights blinding, guns drawn. "Sophia Turner," one barked. "Hands where we can see them." "What?" Sophia's voice cracked. "I'm an attorney." They cuffed her anyway, shoving her against her own car, patting her pockets with deliberate roughness. A shout rang out from the trunk. "Got it, Sarge!" An officer held up a plastic bag of white powder, glinting under the floodlights. Sophia's face collapsed into disbelief. "That's not mine. You planted that." Angela stepped forward, fury burning. "This is a false charge. You're fabricating evidence in front of me." One officer leveled his gaze at her. "Step back. General, unless you want to join her." They stuffed Sophia into the back of the cruiser, her eyes wide with desperation, lips forming words Angela couldn't hear through the glass. "Don't let them win." Then the cars were gone, their taillights swallowed by the dark. Angela returned home near dawn, the weight of exhaustion pressing down but refusing to break her spine. She flicked on the old TV in her mother's living room, the floral curtains filtering morning light. Her own face filled the screen, a local anchor, his voice calm and poisonous. Narrated, disturbing footage released today shows U.S. Army General Angela Carter assaulting police officers during a routine traffic stop. Grainy video played, cut to show only fragments. Her hand jerking, officers stumbling back, her voice distorted. You don't know who you're dealing with. Gone were the slurs, the kicks, the smashed phones. The edit was surgical, designed to transform victim into aggressor. Sources within the Pentagon expressed concern about General Carter's mental state. The anchor continued. Her recent behavior suggests a pattern of volatility and abuse of rank. Angela gripped her cap until the brim bent. On screen, images of Sophia in cuffs, of Daniel on a stretcher, of churchgoers raising fists, were spliced together with words like radical and inciter. The narrative was clear. She was the problem, not the corruption she'd fought. Her phone buzzed. Aunt Rose's trembling voice came through. Baby, turn on Channel 7. She did, and saw the same footage, the same lies, repeated like gospel. Headlines screamed, Rogue General threatens peace. She sat on the worn couch, the one her mother used to nap on after long school days, and felt rage coiled tight in her chest. She had been a soldier for 3 decades, faced insurgents in deserts and jungles. But nothing felt as poisonous as this, the theft of truth. She drove to the hospital under a sky still bruised with night. The ICU smelled of disinfectant and fear. Daniel Brooks lay pale beneath tubes and wires, his face swollen, his breath shallow. Angela sat at his side, her voice a whisper. I'm here, Daniel. I'm not leaving. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. He tried to smile but winced. They really did a number on me, huh? She shook her head, tears threatening. Don't talk. Worth it, he rasped. Got the records. Jacket pocket. They didn't find them. Angela's throat tightened, even broken. He was thinking of evidence, of truth. He gripped her hand weakly. Don't let them win. With his eyes closed again, the monitor beeping steady reassurance. Back at her mother's house, Aunt Rose waited on the porch, her eyes rimmed red from crying. Inside, the old rotary phone hung on the wall, the same one Angela had used as a teenager to call for rides home. She dialed a number burned into memory. Colonel Harris answered on the second ring, his voice taut. Angela, I've been expecting your call. They've edited the footage. The Pentagon's buying the lie? Worse, Harris admitted. The chief of staff is under pressure from senators. Police unions are lobbying. They want an inquiry into your conduct. Angela swallowed rage. They brutalized me, desecrated my mother's grave, framed my allies, and nearly killed Daniel. And I'm the one under investigation? Harris's sigh was heavy with things unsaid. You're rattling cages that stretch into Washington. The mayor's got connections. The unions have money. Angela, watch your 6. They've tried to break your reputation. Next time, they might try something more permanent. The line clicked dead, leaving her with silence. She stood before her mother's portrait in the living room. The painted eyes seemed to follow her, the proud chin set in quiet defiance. Angela whispered, What would you do, Mama? What would you tell me now? The house creaked like it remembered every whispered prayer, every struggle endured within its walls. Aunt Rose appeared in the doorway, clutching a handkerchief. Baby-da, don't let them bury you too. I can't stand to lose you. Angela reached out, squeezing her aunt's hand, but her eyes never left her mother's face. I won't stop, she murmured. Not for me, for Daniel, for Sophia, for every voice they've silenced. For you, Mama. The morning sun slipped through the curtains then, a shaft of light falling across the portrait. For just a moment, Angela thought she saw her mother's lips curve in the faintest smile. The Civic Center smelled faintly of old wood polish and sweat, the kind of building that had hosted county fairs and school graduations for decades. Never expecting to hold a battle for the soul of the town, On this morning, it was packed shoulder to shoulder, every pew and folding chair occupied, every wall lined with reporters clutching cameras and notepads. The hum of whispered speculation filled the air until the sharp bang of Senator Harrison's gavel cut through the noise. Angela Carter sat straight backed at the witness table, her dress uniform immaculate despite the bruises still fading on her face. Her medals and 4 stars gleam beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, a reminder of authority and sacrifice that no smear campaign could erase. Across from her, Chief Robert Hayes leaned in his chair, trying to project confidence, his suit jacket unbuttoned to look casual. Beside him, Mayor David Lawson shifted nervously, his tie too tight, his forehead already damp with sweat. Behind them sat a row of officers, arms crossed, their presence meant to intimidate. But Angela only saw brittle arrogance. Senator Harrison cleared his throat. This hearing will come to order. We are here to investigate allegations of systemic police misconduct, civil rights violations, and potential conspiracy between elected officials and private entities. His gaze swept the room. General Carter, thank you for appearing. Chief Hayes spoke first, his voice smooth and rehearsed. Senator, let me state clearly for the record, these accusations are baseless. General Carter has launched a personal vendetta after a routine traffic stop escalated due to her own aggressive behavior. Angela's lips twitched, but she didn't interrupt. She waited, listening as Hayes spun his lie. The footage shows her striking my officers. My men were simply trying to keep order. She's turned this into a circus to hide her own misconduct. Senator Harrison turned to Angela. General Carter, do you have a response? Her voice carried steady authority, each word sharp. Yeah, Senator. Chief Hayes just admitted the footage was edited. His phrase, the footage shows what they wanted it to show. She nodded to Sergeant Torres, seated near the back. He rose, carrying a laptop connected to the overhead screen. With a few keystrokes, the room dimmed and the raw video began to play. The gasps came almost immediately. There was Angela, calm, presenting her military ID. Then the sudden aggression, Hayes's officers slamming her against the SUV, boots connecting with her ribs, racial slurs shouted into the night, witnesses' phones smashed under police boots. Every frame was authenticated, every timestamp visible. Hayes's jaw tightened, the mask slipping. Senator Harrison raised his brows. Chief Hayes, would you like to explain why this version differs so greatly from the one released to the public? Hayes sputtered. That footage is obviously doctored. Anyone with editing software could. Angela cut in, her tone precise. This footage was verified by military intelligence specialists and civilian forensic experts. The metadata confirms when it was recorded, when it was altered, and who accessed it. The access log, she gestured to the screen, shows your department's IT administrator making edits under your authorization code. Chief Hayes. The room erupted in shouts. Reporters surged forward, pens scratching furiously. Mayor Lawson reached for his water glass, his hand trembling so badly the glass clinked against the table. Angela didn't let the momentum drop. This goes beyond one assault. This is a system built on abuse and profit. New files appeared on the screen. Financial spreadsheets, wire transfers, shell company charts. Grant money intended for community policing was funneled into military-style weapons. Kickbacks flowed from New Horizon Corrections, a private prison company, into accounts connected to Chief Hayes and Mayor Lawson. More arrests meant more prisoners. More prisoners meant more profit. And certain officials, she looked directly at Lawson, got consulting fees for every filled cell. Lawson's face drained of color. That's circumstantial? Audio recordings filled the speakers, Hayes' own voice unmistakable. Make sure we meet quota this month. Doesn't matter how, just fill the cells. Then Lawson's laughter on another tape. The state pays per head. Keep those arrests rolling, and everyone eats. The crowd erupted, shouts of outrage crashing like a wave. Senator Harrison banged his gavel again. But order was gone. Families who'd lost loved ones to police violence stood up, shouting names, demanding justice. Angela raised her voice above the roar. For 20 years, they buried the truth. They silenced witnesses. They intimidated families. But tonight, the silence ends. Two men rose from the audience, uniformed officers. Their faces were pale but determined. One spoke into the microphone shakily. I served under Hayes for 15 years. I followed orders because I was scared. But he told us to target certain neighborhoods, told us to plant evidence when quotas were low. I can't stay quiet anymore. The second officer's voice shook. He ordered the beating of Daniel Brooks. He said, make him an example. We were told if we refused, we'd be next. Hayes's face twisted in fury. You traitors, he barked. But the damage was done. The senator's voice cut clean. Federal marshals, take Chief Hayes and Mayor Lawson into custody. The room exploded again. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing as marshals moved in. Lawson slumped, his tie askew, muttering about being threatened. But no one listened. Hayes fought, shoving his chair back, roaring about lies. But iron cuffs snapped around his wrists all the same. Angela watched, her face unreadable. But inside her chest a fire burned steady. Not joy, not triumph, but vindication. She turned her gaze to the back of the hall where townspeople, black and white, young and old, stood together. Some wept openly, others clapped. But all wore the same expression: relief, release, the first breath of freedom after decades of suffocation. Outside, the courthouse steps had become a sea of people. Satellite trucks lined the streets, their dishes pointed skyward. Cell phones recorded from every angle. When Angela stepped to the podium, chants rose up, her name echoing down Main Street. She gripped the microphone, steady, her voice rising above the roar. The system did not fail today. The people who corrupted it failed, and now they will answer for their crimes. The crowd thundered. Some raised signs scrawled overnight. Justice at last. Thank you, General Carter. No more corruption. Governor Phillips appeared, flanked by aides, his voice grave as he announced, effective immediately, the state is taking control of this police department. Federal oversight will begin at once. Every case from the last decade will be reopened. Every victim will have their day in court. Cheers erupted, tears streaming down weathered faces. Sophia, freshly released from her false charges, stood at Angela's side, scribbling names and details of families ready to sue. Daniel, one still bruised but alive, raised his camera, capturing the moment as history. Aunt Rose pressed through the crowd, her arms around Angela, whispering through tears, your mama would be so proud. And in that moment, with the sun breaking through gray clouds, the chant rose again, not just her name, but a song older than the town's hatred, a hymn of civil rights sung with renewed power. Angela stood straighter, the weight of stars on her shoulders no longer just military decoration, but the symbol of justice carried home. The autumn air carried a gentle crispness as Angela Carter stood at the cemetery gates. The marble headstone of her mother gleamed, scrubbed clean, surrounded by a blanket of roses, lilies, and irises brought by townspeople over the past weeks. The hateful graffiti that once scarred it had been erased not just from the stone, but from the heart of the community. Nearly 200 people gathered quietly among the graves, some holding American flags, others clutching programs for the ceremony. The air smelled of fresh, cut grass and candle wax, the atmosphere solemn yet alive with a new kind of energy. Aunt Rose sat in the front row, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her hand trembling as she dabbed at tears with a lace handkerchief. Daniel Brooks moved carefully through the crowd, his limp less pronounced now, camera swinging from his neck, documenting everything. His investigative work, once dismissed, had earned national recognition. Sophia Turner stood nearby, dressed sharply in a black suit, stacks of files pressed to her chest. Her eyes carried exhaustion, but also unbreakable determination. The kind only those who had walked through fire could understand. Angela adjusted her full-dress uniform, brass buttons glinting, ribbons aligned with flawless precision. The bruises had healed, but she chose not to cover the faint scar along her cheekbone. It belonged to the story, to the truth. She stepped up to the small podium, the wooden boards creaking under her boots. The crowd fell into silence. "My mother taught in this town for 37 years," Angela began, her voice steady but rich with emotion. "She believed that dignity was a shield and knowledge was a sword. She believed in lifting up children even when the world told them to stay small. And when I told her I wanted to serve this country, she said, 'Baby, wherever you go, serve with honor.'" Heads nodded across the rows. Some of the elderly attendees had been her mother's students, their eyes misty with memory. Parents clutched the hands of children, whispering her words into ears that would carry them into the next generation. Angela continued, "This town has carried wounds for decades, wounds made by corruption, by silence, by fear. But wounds don't heal in darkness. They need light. They need truth. They need people willing to fight for them, no matter the cost." She gestured to a poster board display at her side. Renderings showed the future, the Walker Justice Foundation, a building that would stand where an abandoned warehouse once rotted. "Today, we begin a new chapter. This foundation will provide legal aid for those without a voice. It will offer scholarships for children of the incarcerated. It will monitor our police, hold them accountable, and remind every citizen of their rights. But above all, it will give power back to the people." The crowd erupted in applause. Some shouted, "Amen." Others simply clapped until their hands stung. Reverend Miller stepped forward, his old voice trembling as he offered a prayer. This time, there was no hesitation in his tone, no cautionary warning to stay quiet. His words called for courage, justice, and unity. When he finished, Sophia took the microphone. "We already have over 300 cases identified," she declared, her voice cutting through the autumn air. "Wrongful convictions, buried complaints, families torn apart, and every one of them will see daylight. No more silencing, no more cover-ups. We will bring them all into the light." Daniel added next, "This story doesn't end here. It spreads. Other towns are reaching out. People who once felt alone now know they are not. Our fight has become their fight." His camera flashed, capturing Angela at the podium, the crowd behind her, the sunlight streaming across the cemetery like a blessing. One by one, townspeople stepped forward to pledge support. An elderly man with a cane announced he would donate $10 every month, the only spare he had. A young pastor promised his youth group would volunteer. A white teacher on the verge of retirement pledged to tutor children in the foundation's after-school program. Each voice wove itself into a chorus of determination, building something stronger than any one leader could sustain. Angela placed a hand on her mother's headstone, her fingers tracing the carved letters of her name. The sweet scent of flowers surrounded her, a living reminder of sacrifice and love. She whispered so only she could hear, "For you, Mama, for everything you endured so I could stand here today." The ceremony swelled into song. Old hymns rose in the cool air, voices of every race, every age blending into harmony. Angela stood among them, not as a general this time, but as a daughter, a neighbor, a woman carrying her mother's legacy forward. The tears that slid down her face were not of sorrow, but of release. For the first time since she had returned, she felt peace. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the crowd spilled onto Main Street, the energy shifted. Food trucks arrived, serving barbecue and sweet tea. Children played tag on the courthouse lawn. People hugged, laughed, and cried together, no longer separated by fear. News cameras captured every moment, broadcasting not just a scandal, but a rebirth. The chants of protest had transformed into songs of celebration. Angela lingered at the edge of the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the faces lit by sunset. Sophia scribbling notes. Daniel interviewing survivors. Aunt Rose laughing with old church friends. Veterans standing tall in quiet pride. The community had found its strength, its courage, its voice, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that the battle had been worth every scar. She looked once more to the courthouse, where federal agents still filed in and out, carrying boxes of seized evidence. The system that had once oppressed this town now lay in ruins. In its place, something new was being built, not by politicians, not by generals, but by ordinary people standing together. Angela raised her chin, the autumn breeze catching her uniform jacket. "This time," she whispered, almost to herself, "we win." The cameras caught her words, and by nightfall, millions across the nation had heard them. Hashtags flooded social media. Justice in Dixie. Your Carter strong. Your shot truth wins. Donations poured into the Walker Justice Foundation's account. Communities in other states called for their own inquiries. What had begun as one woman's stand in a small southern town had become a movement. And as the stars emerged in the night sky, reflecting faintly off her polished metals, Angela Carter finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. Her mother's fight had become her own, and now it belonged to all of them. I hope you felt the power of this story. If it moved you, share it with your friends and family so they too can see how courage can spark change. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Together, we keep these voices alive.